So today I want to go on to a topic that it will generate a few thoughts. And I'd love to hear your thoughts either after the show. You could text them to me, WhatsApp them to me, voice note. Thought is like this. In our culture, we are jealous of superstars, not all of us, but many of us, but we respect shy, quiet people. In other words, we look at successful, dynamic people, and we might look at them with a sense of, wow, if only I had, that much charisma and character and guts and self-esteem. But the people we often respect and say that they're solid are usually the quiet people in the background, don't stand up, and make a big show of themselves. And those are the people we respect. Now, makes sense. You respect people who don't boast. And people who boast don't make us so comfortable. So let's be honest, whether you like Trump's politics or not, there's very few people that want to marry him or would want to actually be bullied by him, simply because that character is just hectic. So we don't really respect those kind of characters. None of us do, justifiably. But we respect quiet, refined people. And we see people who are putting themselves out there as, often we see this, we see them as, how do I put it? A bit show-offy, have something to prove. They're not as refined. Refined people are edel. The word edel in Yiddish means very refined, very delicate, very sincere, very sweet. And that's why it connects to what am I connecting all this to? I'm connecting it to this week's parsha. And this week, the Torah reads about Noach. Even if you remember very little, you'll know that the story of Noah is the story of the flood. Now, Noah and his family are the only people that survived the flood. And the question is why? Why did nobody else survive? And the answer is simply because they were all sinners. But then you ask yourself the next question. Why did Noah not convince anybody to join him? And your answer will be, he tried, but he wasn't successful. Okay, really? Noah found out about the flood 120 years before the flood happened, and he spent the next 120 years building it. And he did not manage to convince one person to do it, to join him, to change their ways. You know why? Not because Noah was a bad fellow. No, he was shy. Put myself out there, start preaching to people. Who am I? I'm just a small, humble person. But here's the problem. He doesn't get up and say anything. Nobody gets up and says anything, and everyone goes to hell, literally. I mean, the whole world gets flooded. Many of us, I'm not going to put myself included because that's pretty much what I do for a living, is stand and preach the whole day. But many of us, we think, nah, I have nothing really to say. I don't really have a message to share. So then we leave a vacuum. And who fills the vacuum? Look at social media. Most people that are, I know most of you are not on social media, but I'm sure you get forwarded all the conspiracy theories and all that stuff. You read about it. Who dominates the conversation on the most part on Facebook and Twitter or even the radio, newspapers? Meshugayim, nutcases with crazy ideas. Why? Because all good people are humble. So being humble is extremely important. But what happens to the world when all good people are humble? The world doesn't go anywhere. It actually hurts the world. It's something we spoke about when we were sitting around the table in the past many, many times. And I would say the following, if you recall. Share something, say something. You have something to tell this world. Come, share your message. And often the response would be, nah, what do I have to say? We are living in the loudest time in history. More people have opinions and are saying it loudly than ever before. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry is coming and pontificating their ideas. 90% of them are absolute rubbish. And they're getting likes and they're getting forwarded and they're becoming heroes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all normal people? No. We're not on social media. Okay, nice. And we don't really give speeches because we really have nothing what to say. I've always found it funny. It's a similar argument I often hear with people. Why don't you want to have, kids or many kids? They'll say the world is overpopulated. Okay, fine. Let's say the argument is valid. But the point is, you're not convincing all the crazies to stop having kids and all the dysfunctional homes to have, and out of wedlock homes to stop having kids. So that's the answer, right? Let normal families stop having kids. Let all the kids be born out of wedlock or born in cultures which are a threat to human civilization. And and the world will be fine because I don't want to overpopulate it. I'm very pious. It sounds very pious. Think about it. I don't want to have kids because I don't want to populate the world. I want to be humble, so I'm not going to say my piece. I want to be refined, so I'm not going to be on social media, et cetera, et cetera. All this kind of stuff is absolutely holy. But the world goes to the dogs. You have a bunch of nutcases. Not bad people, but their opinions are nuts. Literally, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's conspiracies, the amount of nonsense that people share around is unbelievable. And pretty much that's what social media is saturated with. That's what newspapers are saturated with, tabloids are saturated with, gossip. Everyone just hacking a chainik. You know what hacking a chainik in Yiddish means? Literally, a chainik is what you heat water in on the stove, kettle. Hacking a chainik, you're hitting the kettle. Everyone's hacking a chainik. But normal people, no, we're very humble. So we see our kids, their marriages collapsing, or we see our grandkids absolutely, good kids, but clueless or, sugar-coated and don't really know how to deal with real life. But, I really have nothing to say. I'm really just a simple person. I remember when I realized this maybe in my early 20s, I realized, why are all politicians crazy? Not everybody in the world is crazy, but a ridiculous amount of politicians are. And then I realized, in order to go into politics, you have to be crazy, to be willing to go through that whole grind, to be willing to have to beg for votes and then, make promises and be willing to lose and make a fool out of yourself and have all your dirty laundry spilled out. You have to be crazy. So politics develops, attracts a very high percentage of crazies. Or if not, you don't like the word crazies, people who are narcissists, their ego is way too big for their talents compared. I remember even in my community, in the film community, often the guys that would gravitate to not major politics, but even the local communal politics, get involved in communal organizations. Not always, but quite often, conspiracy theorists, loudmouths, think they're going to change the world, but all good people, They go home, they do their learning, they go to daven, they're good, they lead nice homes, they're raising their kids well. Fantastic, right? But the world does need leaders. You can't have a world without leaders. That's what the world has now. And then what happens? People step into the vacuum. And who steps into the vacuum? Not Mandela's, not Reagan's. Who steps into the vacuum? Meshagayim. But Rabbi, I really have nothing more to say. And that's why, like, I look at the Noah character and I get it. I really I used to talk about it, don't be so focused on yourself. I never really got it. Now I think I finally get it. I really have empathy for this fellow. He sees the whole world. Everyone's going, but immoral. People are doing the most disgusting, immoral, disrespectful things to one another. And he looks at himself and says, he's a goody-goody. Chances are he was born that way. He doesn't have a big Yetzer Hara. He doesn't have a massive evil temptation. He's not really interested in this stuff. Even his name Noach means peaceful. Nice fellow. Sweet, cute cheeks. And God says, I'm about to destroy everybody. I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people if they don't repent. And Noah, you have 120 years to convince them. I don't speak well. I'm not cool. True. There's no question. If you're not cool, I realized on Facebook, in order to get people to read your stuff and to forward it, you have to be, you can't just sit there saying, everybody, can we all get along? Yeah, but still, even if it's not as easy to put out positive messages as it is negative messages, it doesn't mean that we're allowed to cop out. It doesn't mean that we're allowed to back out. We have to be sharing positivity. We have to be sharing our clarity. Think about it this way. Whether you're the most knowledgeable Jew or you're just, you know the basics, chances are you know more about morality, struggle, perspective, wisdom based on life experience than 80% of the world, right? Most of the kids don't have your life experience. Most people don't have your religious ideas that have been inculcated to you through generations. I would say even 90%. You have more moral clarity than majority of the world. So why aren't you talking? Why aren't you engaging? Why aren't you sharing? Why aren't you going out of the comfort zone and getting over your shyness? Yes, putting yourself out there means you might grow a bit of an ego. You might not be as delicate. But do we really have a choice anymore? I'm watching this world, and I'm sure you're watching it with me. Younger generation, and even older generations, people are absolutely lost. People are making up stories. People are believing nonsense more than ever before. People are living with conspiracies. People's politics are absolutely radical. People's perspective of faith is so shallow, etc., etc. There's so much lack of substance in this world. So much lack of substance in the conversation of humankind. And no one's talking. Or not enough people are talking. One thing I learned, I'm a rabbi. I have a beard. I have a yami. There's a limit to how many people I can impact. Even if I have developed to be the most dynamic rabbi on the planet. I'm a rabbi. And that's an upside and that's a downside. But ultimately, the world will not be changed by rabbis. Rabbis have a part to play. But each and every individual, you have to develop your voice. Rosalie, you might remember, I've said it how many times? Write a book, share your stories, start writing a diary, leave something for your family. If you're not going to change the world, at least each of your children and grandchildren should know you intimately. The amount of strength I get each time I think about my ancestors is incredible. It gives me strength because I know their stories. I know what they're about. Being shy and sweet and everybody standing at the funeral and saying, she was such a darling, was never angry at anybody, was so sweet, kept to herself. It's all nice stuff. And it's great. And they should all have a beautiful Gan Eden. But you don't change the world like that. And if you don't change the world, somebody is going to change the world in a not good way. If the conversations that people are having are not based on truth and wisdom and common sense, then it's going to be based on nonsense and garbage and trash. And that's why my question to you today is, I know it's fun to be a Noah, to walk around saying, I'm just a good person. But the world needs more than just a few good people. If I'm looking at the world now without any philosophies, if I'm honest with myself, I see a 7.5 billion people who've lived in a free world for a very long time, pretty much post-World War II, most of the billions. And even those who lived in communism, communism was much worse before the 50s than it was after 50s, 60s. But after that, things got a little normal. Point is, we've lived in a relatively calm world for 60, 70 years, pretty much most of our lifetimes. And the world got bored. People got bored. Because when life doesn't occupy you with stress and war and panic, and life gives you freedom, you have a lot of free time on your hands. And the more free time on your hands you have, the more time you have to be convinced of stupid ideas, the more time you have to have conversations, the more you have time to hate, etc., etc., etc. And the memory of what stupid ideas do to people has slowly faded. People are forgetting that 100 years ago, in 1920, that was when, after many years of ideas, communism finally took over Russia. And then fascism with its ideas, and all the other socialism, all the great ideas of the time, and each one of them ended up in an absolute disaster. But people forget that. So everyone's talking again about socialism, and then there's extreme right-wing fascism, and there's extreme left-wing with its communism, etc., etc., etc. And it's like deja vu. Why? Because life has been too good for too long. And somehow we, instead of having a good life and learning, how to love life, often when life is too good, we become entitled and we become bored and we just get involved in garbage. That's a story of our history. The human being needs freedom, but when you give them freedom, they end up destroying it. The human being needs, to live not in a tyranny, not to live in a dictatorship, in a freedom. But the problem is, you give a human being freedom and they don't know what to do with it, and they self-destruct. It's been the story of Jewish history, story of all of history. And right now, the civilization, my perspective, and each of us are entitled to our perspective, is collapsing on itself. At least the West, but even whatever, not the West. They might be building themselves up, the China, etc., but with very dangerous ideas. Like when I see the conversations that are happening, and I believe strongly that conversations create realities 10, 20 years later, the conversations that humankind are having, unless a miracle happens or unless we really get our act together, we're heading straight to a cliff. How that cliff will play out, don't know. Well, COVID hasn't been great, but it's still. But America is a perfect example of a society that maybe up to 20 years ago it knew what it wanted from itself and it knew where it was going. And in the 21st century, absolutely lost its marbles. So much freedom, so much money, so much opportunity. From a full-on, a perspective of the entire country, the Jewish community pretty much assimilated at 70, 80%. Like, we were given freedom. The 90s was like a big boom. Everything was great. And just everything collapses on itself. And what's the answer? The answer is not to go back to dictatorships. The answer is to have values. You have free time, go learn. Not stupid ideas from a new Meshuggah that came up with a radical idea how to redistribute wealth. Go learn God's wisdom. Go learn Torah. Grow your character. Upgrade your self-esteem. Upgrade your marriage. Upgrade your relationship with your children. Do things that are meaningful. And the problem is now that we have 7.5 billion people with a lot of time on their hands. And yes, there's a lot of poverty, but gosh, there's a lot of time. And everyone could sit there saying we're the busiest generation over. It's so not true. The amount of TV shows out there that are all running because there's enough people watching them, and Facebook and social media and just junk and nonsense out there. We have a lot of time on our hands, and that a lot of time is not being filled productively, and we're literally losing ourselves. So what do you do when you see that? Become a Noah. You go build your little ark. I stay on Facebook. I don't watch TV. I'm a goody. I just good old-fashioned values. That's great. But other than you, who's gaining out of that? People often accuse the Haredi world, some of the Haredi world at least, to being isolationist. They lock themselves up in their communes, in their communities, and they don't involve in the world, and they're closed-minded, etc., and they're not part of the media. Now, I personally agree with part of that accusation. Chabad, fundamentally, the Rebbe did not believe in that and told us to go out there to the world. But that's not my point. My point is, but every community is like that. Every community isolates. Every person naturally likes going into themselves and keeping themselves safe and making believe as if the issues are not there. Avoiding the issues. But issues that are avoided don't go away. I've never seen an issue that's been avoided that's gone away. It stays under the surface, but it grows and grows and grows until it explodes. So we could sit there saying, who cares about the 50 million people living in poverty in this country as long as I'm comfortable. It explodes. You cannot deny reality for that long. Yeah, my marriage is okay. Whatever, it's not perfect, but there's a lot of stuff that have to be dealt with, but no, I'm going to leave it. It explodes in our face. Noach was the ultimate avoider. He just avoided life. It's too uncomfortable, too awkward to go down the rabbit hole, to go and have to face the struggles. It's just uncomfortable. It's much better to just stay on the side. Just keep the peace. Don't fight with anybody. Don't put your foot down. Don't have an opinion. Smile, be gracious, and the world will live happily ever after. Fine. And Noach was saved. But his whole world was destroyed. And is that good enough to be saved? Is it good enough to just be a good person? Or does Hashem and life want more from us? Don't just be good, make the world better. Put yourself out there. Go out of your comfort zone and try, at least in some way, to make the world better. By forcing yourself to have conversations, by forcing yourself to learn new things and explore yourself and stretch yourself. And if necessarily, call out something that's wrong, if it's wrong, to step out of that image of a goody-goody, a nice boy, a nice girl. We're not put into this world to be nice. We're put in this world to change the world in a nice way. It's a famous example that the sages gave to describe what Noah was, what kind of individual. And in Yiddish, they call it a tzaddik in pelts, a tzaddik in fur. What does that mean? So they gave the example, somebody comes to shul early in the morning in a freezing Russian winter. Now, he has two options. He's a big tzaddik, very righteous individual, woke up at 5 in the morning to go daven. Option A, he's in the shul, he puts on a fur coat, and now he's warm. Option B, he lights a fire, and then everybody's warm. What does Noach do? Noach was a tzaddik in pelts. He was a righteous fellow, covered in fur. Why didn't he light a fire? Now, you might sit there thinking, okay, what's the rabbis on to? I've been in this world for 60, 75 years. This is the way I am, etc., etc. Fair. But each day that we wake up and we tell ourselves that this is the way I am, why do we wake up today? If you are today who you were yesterday, why is that? Why wake up another day? That's Groundhog Day. If today I'm going to be the same person than I was yesterday, then I'm living Groundhog Day. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not moving. Each day that we're alive, it means that Hashem wants us and is looking at us and saying, stretch yourself. Go out of your comfort zone a little more. Pull yourself further. Do the big thing. So each and every one of us in our own life, have our own pickle. Each one of us is having our own struggles, and it's far be it from me to tell anybody what to do specifically. But the idea that I hope that we explored today, and I hope that at least will inspire me, don't be a cop-out. Don't, walk around feeling righteous by being so humble and quiet. Being a goody-goody is sweet, but the world never got changed to the better with goody-goodies. And if we're not part of a conversation of positivity, then the conversation of negativity. If I'm not fighting to make my family healthier, the family's going to get less healthy. If I'm not in the ring, if I'm not boxing, if I'm not in the game of life and I'm just a bystander, naturally things will go down. Each day we're given life as a day to fight with our entire being, to show up and fight. And if you looking around the world and all you're saying is, hey, at least if the world goes to the dogs, I'll be dead by then, that's not an answer. Again, or, as long as my little corner of, Joburg, my little house, I'm fine over there. The rest of the country, the rest of Africa, the rest of the world, no, I'm okay. The moment we see ourselves like that, then we're forgetting what it means to be a human being. Kol, Yisrael, Arevim, Zelzeh, we're all integrated into one another, and we all have to be there for one another. I'm not saying each and every one of us has to become bombastic and loud, but each of us has to show up a bit more instead of just being bystanders. Noach was a bystander, and he had to stand as his entire universe collapsed. Don't stand by while your kid's life is self-destructing. Don't stand by when you see something that you can call out. Don't stand by. You might not be known as Mr. or Mrs. Nice Person if you open your mouth, but at least you might make a difference. Shkoyach, everybody, and thank you so much for